Sorry about it. A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to one and all present. Once again, I, Yagnesh Desai, have a pleasure and privilege to invite and welcome you all on the third and the fourth session of this summit. Yesterday, we had a very fruitful discussions on the equitable and the sustainability recovery and about the building comprehensive global sustainability reporting system. We all have been immensely benefited by the deliberations and the discussions by the galaxy from all around the world. And kudos to all of them. It's now time for all of us to come together and think of Mother Nature and the planet. It's not uncommon to hear about the unseasonal rains. Just about before the beginning of the summit, we were discussing that there's a rain in Kerala, there's a rain in Gujarat, there's a rain in yesterday in Mumbai. So all are the results of the vagaries of the climatic change, and it's time to take the corrective actions to control the global warming. Friends, today's two sessions are of great importance. They are very important and interesting. They're going to be very interesting as they're concerned about the climate risk and transition to low carbon. And we have been all talking about how the accountants are going to carry forward the roles and responsibilities in this global agenda of the sustainability agenda. And the fourth session is going to be very interesting because it's going to discuss how the professional accounting organizations and the regional bodies are going to help accounting fraternity in meeting these challenges. So without doing too much of ado, I am straight coming to introducing the keynote speakers and all these speakers and the panelists and our moderator for our third session, which is climate risk and transition to low carbon economy. I welcome all the dignitaries who have agreed to come and join today and share their wisdom with us. So welcome all of you, and thank you so much for sparing your valuable time and having the ability to come here. The first one is the keynote speaker will be by Mr. Oliver. Mr. Oliver is the CEO of the Accountancy Europe. Mr. Oliver is the Chief Executive Officer of the Accountancy Europe since 2006. He has diverse professional experience and having been a public prosecutor in France, a director with PwC, a board member of the European Policy Center, a director of XBRL International, and a business and policy consultants. Then we have a session moderator, Mr. Praveen Garg, IS, retired, former Special Secretary and the Finance Advisory of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Sri Praveen Garg is an IS officer of the Madhya Pradesh cadre with over 33 years of experience. He has recently served as a Special Secretary and Financial Advisor SSNFA at the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. During his tenure, he has dealt with the areas of forestry, environment and climate change with engagement at both national and international level. Then we have the galaxy of panel speakers. Mr. Shankar Venkateswaran, Executive Director, India Interim CDP. Mr. Shankar is currently serving as a board member and the Interim Executive Director at CDP in India. He serves on the board of several NGOs and corporate foundations and is currently chairperson of the Oxfam India and CSR Trust for SDGs in India. Then we have Ms. Barbara Davidson, Senior Analyst, Regulatory Team and the Carbon Tracker Initiative. Barbara Davidson is currently serving as a Senior Analyst leading research on accounting and auditing disclosures at the Carbon Tracker Regulatory Teams. She has over 20 years of advisory, accounting, relationship, and stakeholders management experience from working in United States of America, France, Hong Kong, and UK. Then we also have with us Dr. CMA Nandita Mishra, ambassadors IIRC. She's the ambassadors of IIRC. Dr. Nandita is ambassador to IIRC International Integrated Reporting Council and faculty at the Linköping University, Sweden, United Kingdom. She is also country director at HETL, Higher Education Teaching and Learning in USA. If I'm not mistaken, she was one of the faculties for us in the sustainability reporting session. Then we have Mr. Chaitanya Kalia. Chaitanya is the product leader of climate change and sustainability services for EY. He has over 19 years of experience and has worked with 80% of top 100 Indian companies in the areas of climate change and sustainability of the CSR. So now, without doing too much of doing, I will invite our today's keynote speaker, Mr. Oliver. It's over to you, sir, Mr. Oliver.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to start with the usual sentence. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are very much audible and visible, both, sir.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, distinguished guests and participants, eminent panel members, I must say it's really a great honor to be speaking over virtually in India. I mean, I see India as a very important country by its size, its economy, but also by its intellectual and spiritual heritage. Unfortunately, it is also a great country by its carbon footprint and its level of pollution. So I really commend the Institute for organizing this webinar. And I must say, the level of attendance fills me with hope and admiration. You asked me to kindly speak about climate risk and transition to low carbon economy. So let's first define the terms. What's climate risk? Well, according to science, it is simply the risk of destroying the geophysical conditions that so far have made life possible on the planet, nothing less. And again, according to science, the sixth massive extinction has started and humanity is not exempt from this extinction. But before we get there, and although science say we are accelerating in this direction, we see a multiplicity of risks that already start materializing around the planet. First of all, physical risk. We all know about extreme weather events, lethal heat waves, water excess or shortages, depending on where you are. The list is long. But then comes socioeconomic risk. For instance, access to production factors like energy and water, which are essential to food, but also for business, for instance, to grow cotton. And you can extend the list to phosphorus and many metals like copper and others. So this means stranded assets, stressful work conditions, infrastructure collapse, increasing income inequalities. The list of socioeconomic risk resulting from physical risk is even longer. But I think it is also a totally unprecedented risk. Well, unprecedented since 65 million years. Most of the risk that we know, especially as accountants, I would say, and business people, are risks that we undergo or manage, and then we recover or adjust. But climate is different. Climate is a non-stationary, non-linear risk, and it will continue increasing because of the inertia of geophysical systems that cannot absorb the levels of carbon that we have produced in the past 200 years, but even more so in the past 20 to 50 years, what scientists actually call the Great Acceleration. And it is not a good acceleration, an acceleration in the good direction. It is also a systemic risk in the way that it affects everything else and is related to broader environmental risks like pollution. And I would really like to underline that all this is non-ideological. It is facts. Facts that sometimes have been contested and manipulated, but today the scientific consensus is equally unprecedented, but nonetheless still too often disregarded. However, to my view, the main risk with climate is what I call a psychological risk. It's in our brains. Because climate risk is still poorly recognized, if not denied, despite 40 years of scientific evidence and warning. It is often misunderstood, poorly measured, or even unmeasured, and we're ill prepared. It has become clear, I think, now that most governments and business leaders have little understanding of the geophysical realities of climate change and its timeline. And as accountants, well, I think we know well that we can't solve a problem that is not understood, measured, and reliably reported. And I would add, as Einstein said, because it's always nice to quote Einstein in any presentation, even if the quote is most probably fake, but we can't solve problems with the same type of thinking that we used to create them. And this is pretty much how we're still thinking about climate risk when we think about it right now. So where does that lead us? Well, if we look again in an objective and non-ideological way at scientific research, political debates, and business practices over the past 40 years, I think we can have three certainties. The first certainty is that human activity is the problem. Well, that's nice to say, but what does it mean? It means that the way we do business and the way we live, especially in the Western world, and the way we drive others to similar aspirations must change. The approaches, that's really the second certainty. It is that the approaches we have tried in the past 40 years are simply not delivering. Our carbon emissions continue increasing, not decreasing. And the same goes for raw material depletion, biodiversity destruction, ocean acidity, impact of waste and pollution, soil exhaustion. I could carry on. So that brings me to the third certainty that I derive from an observation of the past 40 years. We will change. But the choice is between an orderly transition or a chaotic transformation. Personally, I would like to opt for an orderly transition, not only for my kids, actually, but for my own old days, because the end is coming close. It is not anymore a matter for future generations. We've said that for 40 years. Future generation is here now. So an orderly transition means, as you rightly say in the title of the session, a transition to a low carbon economy. Well, low carbon may not be sufficient. I think zero carbon is what we need. And it needs to happen in the next 10 years to run a chance of preserving a livable world. So what is a low carbon economy? Well, it's an economy that uses clean energy, but also less energy and material, which raises difficult questions on our current levels or aspirations to development and our way of consuming and doing business. But researchers have clearly identified the direction of travel, although leaders find it a quite difficult path. It is about carbon neutrality, but also about circularity, sobriety, innovation, but more importantly, about fundamental shifts in our civilizations to find new sources of fulfillment than mass consumption and new sources of profit than mass consumption. What does this mean for accountants? Well, the first thing it means is that we've got a job to do because accountants do measure, account, and report on what business is doing. But I think there is more than that, a lot more than that. I think this is a unique opportunity to really act as the strategic advisors that we aspire to be, because business will need to prepare and manage risk, to respond to what I expect to be a deluge of new regulatory requirements around the globe. For instance, to make sure that business deliver on their commitments to net zero and their great strategy execution without any greenwashing. Things like supply chain due diligence is around the corner, energy efficiency, product standards, waste management. And I think in all these fields, audit will be part of the equation. Well, it will be part of the equation if we in the profession are ready, as otherwise someone else will do the job. More importantly, I think, and above all, business will need advice and assistance to transform their business models, because that's what it's all about. In conclusion, climate risk and the overall environmental and social risks are a bundle of extraordinary systemic threats that create an imperative for fundamental transformation of our civilizations. But for us in the accounting profession, it is a historical opportunity to fully play our role and fulfill our commitment to the public interest. Again, I commend the Institute of Chartered Accountants in India, its president and staff, and I wish you a great webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver, to you as well for coming here and participating in this webinar, in the summit, and for the wonderful comments. And now it's time to hand over to CA Praveen Garg ji for the moderator of the session 3. So it's all over to you, CA Praveen ji.
Thank you, Mr. Desai.
It's over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Desai. Good evening to all the panelists and the participants who are listening and watching this webinar. And the agenda today is accelerating sustainability agenda and opportunities for the professional accountants. I would like to, if you add something, it's not only opportunities, it is the responsibilities for the professional accountants. It's important to inquire what is behind this exercise, particularly in the context of this session. Why it's so important transition to a low carbon economy and the urgency behind tackling the climate risk. Transitioning to a low carbon economy will require a multi-pronged approach and sustainability. Reporting is a very important aspect of this transition. And reporting means the accountants, generally the accountants, management and the accountants. And this will require quantification and the key to assess where we stand and where we are going. And as was rightly put by the keynote speaker, we are approaching the 6th extinction. And as we say most of the time, there's no second planet. There's the only planet. And it has to be maintained, the degree, the level, the temperatures are rising has to be limited within 5.5 to the pre-industrial time. So it's a material risk in the contemporary time, and I would say that ESG reporting is one of the areas which the accountants can help. And recently, SEBI has come out with a circular which has 2 annexures, and it has made it mandatory for the top 1,000 listed companies to do it from 22-23. It's a huge reporting. It's huge reporting, and it has 330 parameters, very granular data on that. So I think the most of the accountants or the certified accountants should be doing that. So that's a step forward. And this year it is voluntary. I think the regulatory approach is there, but there's a lot of greenwashing also. So the job of the accountant is to see that this kind of greenwashing doesn't happen. If the regulator requires certain thing, or the Institute of Chartered Accountants Sustainability Board also requires certain things, it is there, and greenwashing is not there in the reporting of the parameters. So this is a very interesting group of panelists. I'll start by asking first from Mr. Shankar. I would like to have your response on this, that climate risk disclosure makes a good business sense. It drives businesses to adopt sustainability measures that will help climate change. When climate change is managed, profitability is more likely. Please, I request you to throw some light on the business case for climate-related disclosures and how the businesses should be promoted for climate-related disclosures. Over to you, Shankar.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And I also wish to thank the Institute for inviting me to be part of this very, very illustrious panel. So, Chair, to your question on the business case for disclosures, so first of all, I should say that I have a vested interest in disclosures. CDP, the organization that I represent, is the largest repository of climate-related data in the world. We have about over 13,000 companies and several cities and regions that report climate-related data into the CDP platform. So we have access to, and we analyze and use a lot of the data relating to climate change, which is with us, which we then analyze. So in that sense, I guess you could say I have a vested interest. You also made a reference, Chair, to the BRSR that's the SEBI mandated. Again, I was part of the committee that designed the BRSR on behalf of the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. I have been spending a lot of my last few years, in fact, a decade, on the whole issue of sustainability and its disclosure. I also was the head of sustainability for the Tata Group of companies, which, as many would know, is one of the largest groups of companies in the world. So I do sort of understand disclosures even from a company perspective. So what is the business case when I put all these experiences together? To me, actually, whether it is climate or general sustainability, it makes a lot of sense for businesses to have to disclose this. First and foremost, I think what disclosures do, what reporting does, is it provides a mirror to businesses in terms of their own performance. It allows companies to look at what they themselves are doing. Let's say in the context of climate change, what is happening in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions they are emitting, where that is headed, how has it been moving historically, and it enables them, therefore, to make and take corrective actions. And when others in the same sector, the peer companies, also similarly report and disclose, it also gives them a sense of a benchmark against which they could themselves see their own performance. So principally, the reason I would say why companies, the business case for companies to report is it is a feedback loop for them. It is a mirror for them to improve their own performance in terms of climate, in terms of sustainability. But it also is very clear that not only the companies themselves, but all their stakeholders are seeking this information. If you look at the investor community, the investors who obviously are very, very sensitive to the risks that their investments are subject to would obviously want to know what the companies that they are invested in are doing in terms of climate change. So how are they performing? What kinds of initiatives they are taking to reduce their impact? So investors are looking for this information, not only after they've invested in the company, but it has also increasingly become the basis on which they will invest in a company. So if a company is looking to expand, to increase its footprint and is looking for capital, a company today will not be able to attract capital if it is not disclosing what it is doing and the strategy behind what it is doing in climate change to the investor. The investor will not be interested in investing in them unless they disclose. So very, very strong business case there. Thirdly, customers. Customers are increasingly talking about how they need to themselves control the kind of emissions that exist in their whole ecosystem through the value chain. So if you're say a company in India and you're exporting to somewhere overseas, that company which is buying your product is going to be asking you, tell us more about your emissions, tell us how you're controlling them, and so on. And if you're able to do that, you can actually do business. If you're not able to do that, you will not be able to do business. So to me, the business case is very clear. It helps the company itself improve its own performance. It helps companies attract capital for its own work, and it helps companies get new markets, new customers, and therefore grow. So to me, it is very, very clear why a company needs to do this. And so very often I wonder, when companies ask the question, why should we report? That it is actually a very straightforward, simple answer. And you will find that the companies that are reporting themselves are not asking this question because to them, the answer is obvious. I think climate change brings in it a peculiarity to the kind of reporting that is being done. And I will make this last point and I will stop there, Chair. I think one of the things that disclosures or reporting usually has been doing is historical. Even financial accounts are historical. I think what is going to be different and what is different about climate change reporting is that increasingly it is going to move from the historical to the future. The kind of reporting that is going to be asked of companies is not only how much GHG did you emit last year, but what is your targets for reducing GHG in the future? What are the kinds of activities you will be doing in the future? That's going to be the future of reporting when it comes to climate change. And so companies that are already doing this now will be in an excellent position to be, therefore, think about how it's going to strategize its low carbon paths and therefore be ready to report in the future. So I'll stop there, Chair, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Shankar. It's very informative and very heartening to know that 13,000 companies and many countries data is with you. So you're evaluating and probably advising them or indicating and publishing reports on that. I move on to the next panelist, Barbara Davidson. So the question is, transition to net zero and climate resilient economy, global investments must be increased above pre-pandemic levels and be aligned with long-term national and global objectives. What specific roles does public sector and private sector investments play in this regard? Over to you, Barbara.
Thank you very much for this. Thank you for inviting me to speak on this panel today. It's a pleasure to be part of this conversation and this panel with other great speakers. So first, in answering your question, I will address the public sector's role in investing. And I'm going to start my answer by restating the obvious, as people have already mentioned. We have a limited carbon budget remaining if we want to stay below 1.5 degrees. And so we have to start reducing emissions today, immediately. And I think others have already contributed to why that is the case. And also, we're starting to discuss in this panel that this is not just a climate or environmental issue. The more that we're investing in unprofitable technologies and assets today, the more capital we're putting at risk, as well as we're putting our climate goals at risk. So I'm going to use some figures from Carbon Tracker's report, which is called Do Not Revive Coal, to preface my answer. I'll focus my answer on public sector investment on the coal issue. So today, we found in our report, we found that 70% of the global coal fleet relies on public policy support. And so without this support, we found that it's unlikely that these global coal plants would be profitable. And in fact, this seems to continue. So as part of COVID recovery programs, 18 economies and 8 multilateral development banks still pledged more to the fossil fuel industry, actually $330 billion to the fossil fuel industry than they have to the clean energy industry. So this is disappointing in the face of our need to reduce emissions. And we found also that 5 countries in Asia, which are China, unfortunately India, Indonesia, Japan, and Vietnam, still plan to build more than 600 new coal plants, which would be approximately 80% of the new coal plants in regulated markets. So these 5 countries are planning to build 80% of new coal plants. 92% of these plants will be uneconomic because of commitments over the long term to reduce emissions, because of oversupply of coal for power, because of carbon pricing, because of net zero commitments. These plants are going to be uneconomic. And so we're putting significant amounts of investor capital at risk by doing this, by continuing to build these plants. We've estimated that $150 billion of investor capital will be at risk if these new plants are built. And also, these countries include or are responsible for 75% of the existing coal plants today. 27% of these coal plants today are unprofitable, and they will continue to rise in unprofitability. The percentage of these will continue, a higher percentage will be unprofitable in the future as we increase our climate policies and we increase emissions regulations. And so we have existing coal plants that are unprofitable, and we have new coal plants that are being planned that will also be unprofitable. And so what should we do? What can be done? Now, from the public sector perspective, we have to stop investing in new coal projects. So cancel the investments in new coal projects. It sounds simple. I know it's not as simple as that, but that's what we have to aim for. We have to the public sector needs to earmark spending for investments in renewable energy as part of the COVID stimulus packages, and not be spending on fossil fuel projects as part of these packages. As part of this, we've actually found that new renewables are less expensive than 77% of existing coal. So not only is this helping the climate, but this again is a investment. It's an economic decision. It's a smart economic decision to do this. So public sector should also invest in flexible, stable, and smart grids, as well as storage, which are again also a lower cost solution. It's also better, again, as we've seen, for the environment and for the workers involved. The public sector needs to level the playing field, so end existing fossil fuel subsidies, because renewables need to be put on equal footing with fossil fuels if we are going to be able to do this. We need to invest in training, obviously, workforces, because we know we're going to have to, people are going to have to move over to these new technologies, and we have to start helping them retrain, educate them today. And also, government reforms and climate policies will provide signals to companies and investors. So that will help unlock more private investments, which is the second part of the answer. So we need less investments in fossil fuels and more investments in renewables by the public sector, as well as the private sector. Of course, we know the private sector has a significant role to play. The public sector investments alone are not going to achieve the level of investment that we need to meet our emissions goals and our temperature goals. Some say there's still a significant finance gap in the trillions of dollars that are needed to achieve our goals. So we know that private investments have a role to play in filling that gap. The UN high-level climate action champions commissioned an analysis, and they found that the private sector could deliver 70% of investments that we need to meet net zero goals. So as we know, they are important. We also know that the IEA the International Energy Agency released a report earlier this year saying we cannot have any new fossil fuel projects if we want to meet our climate goals. This is in line with what I was saying for public sector. And so one of the most critical things that private investors can do is to stop investing in new fossil fuel projects. Instead, the private sector needs to focus on investing in technologies such as renewable energy, off-grid solar and energy storage, agribusiness, green buildings, and urban transportation. Private investors have to work with their current investees as well, and not just look for new investments, to understand how their current investments are going to reduce their emissions and how they're going to change their strategies. And if their current investees are not doing this, or they don't look like they're going to be able to do it in time, investors are going to have to start replacing board members, as we've already seen with Exxon earlier this year. The other thing I want to say in answer to your question is the growth of coalitions that we've seen in this space. So as we just saw at COP, there was the announcement of the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, or GFANZ, which is a coalition of financial institutions and other actors that are aiming at accelerating decarbonization, that's great. They're representing $130 trillion of private capital. So there's capital there. It's a great effort. But and it's very important that they say that they will be using science-based targets to achieve net zero. But these actors need to provide more information, more detail around how they're going to achieve these goals. And these actors also include the audit industry. So, for example, what are the interim steps that these players are going to take to reduce their own emissions? How are they going to reduce their portfolio emissions? When will they align all of their assets with what their net zero targets? Because our understanding is that only 35% of their assets are being aligned to net zero targets. So what's happening to the other 65% of their assets? What are they doing now? They have 2 to 3 years to show their plans, but we need to know what they're doing today and how they're working or starting to work with their investees today to ensure that there's a transition, and that the transition will involve the winding down of assets and not just divestment, because then that's just moving the problem to somewhere else. So other questions that I think need to be resolved for the role of private sector investment are why, again, some of these members, such as member banks, continuing to invest in fossil fuels. There was a report earlier this year called Banking on Climate Chaos that indicated that 60 of the world's largest commercial banks have financed $3.8 trillion in fossil fuel development since the Paris Agreement. So that's about $750 billion of fossil fuel finance a year. So why are they continuing to do this? They need to show why they're doing this, and what is their plan to stop doing this and to phase out their fossil fuel investments, or to work with those companies again. And how are auditors going to ensure that they have the education and policies in place to audit across regions, to audit these companies? So these are part of the actions that I think are needed if we really truly want to achieve our climate goals, and as well as preserving capital. And later in the panel, if we have time, I'll talk about the role of financial reporting and the analysis that we did in our Flying Blind report, which speaks to the previous panelists, and actually how financial reporting today should be reflecting the financial impacts of the energy transition, and that better disclosures today will help investors achieve these targets. That's my answer for you.
Thank you. It was very informative. But I would like to just add that the developing countries like India, who historically, the emission level has been very low. So they have to catch up with the development. And our Honorable Prime Minister has announced that by 2070, we will have net zero emissions. And 50% of our renewable energy, our energy requirements will come from renewable energy. That's 50% by 2030. So it's very interesting. And what you're saying is that most of these fossil fuel plants will become unviable, non-profitable after some time. So I think that needs to be more emphasized with the bankers and with the investors and the public sector policymakers. So thank you very much. And my next question is to CMA Dr. Nandita Mishra. Today we witnessed the troubling evolution of corporate greenwashing. In your opinion, what impact it is having, and how can stakeholders identify greenwashing? Over to you, Nandita.
Yeah. Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to this significant seminar. I really feel very honored to be part of this panel with such intellectual and bright speakers. And I think this issue of greenwashing is very prominent and relevant because as the increasing awareness is catching around sustainability, and green business model is there to stay, and we are witnessing also an increase in cases of greenwashing. It's not just small companies who end up doing this, but also big companies. I believe that biggest impact of greenwashing is that it's limiting meaningful action to help the environment. And the worst part is that this is also allowing businesses to profit from conscious customerization without committing to long-term action. It is waste of crucial resources, and that could be better allocated to truly make some difference. So without thinking what exactly we are doing, maybe we are trying to fool not just our investors or our stakeholders, but it is something which is of growing concern. With growing cases, I think not even the governing bodies are more conscious, but also companies who practice this may have to face prosecution by FTC, for example. It is also tarnishing the business reputation, and a negative brand image will be created because of this. And this may also lead to exposing customers to environmentally damaging products. We never know what kind of products we are buying just in the name of sustainable products sometimes. Despite these perceived short-term benefits, greenwashing can ultimately play a significant role in diminishing a non-ESG compliant business. I think in more than 35 years since it has been given this name, greenwashing, the market has become awash or in greenwashing. It's easy to understand why since consumers want sustainable products more, and therefore we see that more and more companies are going towards greenwashing, and they are doing just to show that they are sustainable. Marketing their sustainability is easier said than done. That's where I think the role of transparency should be emphasized. I truly believe that the answer to this problem is to become more and more transparent. And when it comes to marketing of environmentally safe or sustainable products or services, it should be very open, it should be very explicit, it should prevent, maybe we should not advertise things which are not there, and we should provide evidence. I think transparency is necessary to combat greenwashing, and when it comes to maybe intent to mislead, no matter what the motivation or cause is, greenwashing can actually destroy the sustainable business, the initiatives which we want to take. And I think only by more and more bringing more and more transparent business, more and more transparent annual reports, I think we can combat this. So I think greenwashing is more, the more transparent the companies become, it is the best answer which we can give towards greenwashing. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Nandita. So essentially, in short, few corporates are following the greenwashing practices, which is not harming not only the corporates, but the consumers and the environment in the long term.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the regulators have a role to play there, be it the pollution control boards or the reporting requirements by the regulators. So I think sooner or later we will have some whistleblower policy also on the corporate greenwashing. So thank you. So now to Mr. Chaitanya, I'll ask you a question. Globally consistent and comparable disclosures by firms of the climate-related financial risks have become increasingly important. In your opinion, what are the areas of gaps and challenges in the consistent implementation of climate-related disclosures? What important steps would be needed on the path towards convergence with anticipated international reporting standards on climate? Over to you, Chaitanya.
Thank you, Mr. Garg. Very interesting question. And thanks to the Institute for organizing this conference, and happy to be part of it. Although I must admit, unlike last year, I'm not able to put a lot of time with the Institute's activity. So my profound apologies for that. But at the same time, I really want to congratulate because of the excellent work that the Institute is doing in this area. So very proud to be associated with that. Mr. Garg, you had, kind of two questions, or rather I will answer your question in two parts. One part is about the climate change related risk and its disclosure. So it has, two components, obviously. One is the methodology or technical elements, that what needs to be constituted as the climate change related risk and how we are putting it together. There are a variety of industries. Will the climate change related risk for a let's say financial sector or a oil and gas company or a mining company, is it going to be same? Or are we looking at climate risk from the recipient point of view? People like me and you, is it about us? So these are some of the, the terminology or technical matters that has been over the years been discussed, etc., and getting resolved. So that is part one. Part two is because we are talking about climate change related financial risk. We have discussed, all the eminent speaker talked about, it started with how the erratic rains are creating havoc in our life. How do we convert all of that to a numerical rupee term or a dollar term, which is the price point or the second part, which becomes significantly important. If you are looking at a risk, how do we convert that to the financial risk? Now, these two are the key questions, and these questions are, picked up by several agencies, framework, global institutions, NGOs, etc., which is second part of your question, that how they're converging, what can be done about it. Now, recently, there are so many things to talk about. I'll just pick up one, which is very, very latest. And recently, this global foundation, which probably all of you know, is about, IFRS Foundation. They have decided that and disclosed, in fact, in COP 26 on 3rd of November, if I'm right, this International Sustainability Standard Board in terms of what should be the work of the foundation. And they have prepared and submitted few technical readiness documents, which is putting everyone together. And in terms of convergence, a lot of, feedback has been taken up. They have been taken up from, one is TCFD, which is again, coming from financial reporting and risk disclosure point of view, which is task force for climate related financial disclosure. This is one. IFRS, of course, is known to all of you. There is also Climate Disclosure Standard Board, CDSB, which has been formed. So input has been taken from them, and also from the industry side via World Economic Forum. And there, I might have missed few more. So there are few others. All this, variety of international institutions known for making standards, they have come together. And now they are trying to come up with, draft standard is available for anyone to go through and read. But in summary, what it is saying that, okay, here is the climate change related risk. We have to divide into two parts. One is transition risk and another is the physical risk. And then, the recommendation right now is by sector, what should be the element, and those has been, kind of defined. And Mr. Garg, you also talked about, BRSR, which is also given certain KPI, 330 or 300 plus KPIs. They all are going to be similar. So probably, in summary, organization has to understand them, both at a India level, at an international level, start looking at it, see how many of them are applicable, and then start disclosing it. At the same time, the auditors or people who are going to review, they also have to, look at it, understand it. And the last year, the Sustainability, Reporting Standard Board of ICI, they have also adopted one guideline for our chartered accountant friends, that how they can, look at some of these elements in terms of, reporting in the annual report. All these things are going to come together, and as we see in a year or two, a lot of this activity will come, and hopefully this, my apologies for a long answer, but hopefully all this will help to reduce two things. One is the impact for all of us and for the industry on the climate change, so that we understand it better. And second is, of course, the financial implication, because of which is expected to be huge. And if our Honorable Prime Minister in the COP has demanded a lot of funding to meet this climate change related requirements. All these things are different buckets, but answering to your questions are likely to get merged. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chaitanya. It's very interesting to learn that there are so many boards and there are so many agencies we are asking for disclosures. I just hope it not become multiple agencies and asking a lot of disclosures on different. So there has to be a consensus by the boards and by the regulators what disclosures they want over a period of time. It should not be going in different directions. Otherwise, the business houses or the consumers, they won't know which direction to go. And they should not change too frequently. If they're changing it too frequently after every year, then again, it's a problem for the industry, and whether it's private sector or the public sector. So I think there's time for one more question. So I'll ask Mr. Shankar that developing a circular economy and support of digitalization can contribute to reducing emissions and deliver cost savings across various key investment areas such as energy efficiency, innovation, and adaptation. In your opinion, what are the barriers, drivers, and required policies for the same? Over to you, Shankar.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll try and be brief. I'm conscious that we have very little time. So I think it's important to sort of recognize the logic of why the circular economy can reduce carbon emissions. I think at the very basic fundamental level, what the circular economy thinking does is to say that when you already have expended energy and emitted GHG gases in producing a product, you should not, and after it is end of life, there's no point in just tossing it away and starting again. How can we sort of recycle it? But there's a difference in the way you need to think about recycling, and that's the important aspect of circular economy. So let me just illustrate it with an example. So you have an engine, you have an internal combustion engine. Now, after the life of that engine is over, you have two choices. You can either recondition the engine and reuse it, or you can melt the engine, bring it back to its elemental parts and start producing a new engine. Now, what the circular economy is saying is that there is already energy that has gone in producing that engine. Then you want to melt it, you're going to spend more energy and emit more carbon, and then you're going to produce it again. Instead of that, recondition the engine. Just make it as good as new, so that what is called the embedded carbon is not then released, but it continues to use. So that's the basic thinking around a circular economy. And I think it's a very, very powerful concept for multiple reasons. One is, of course, it reduces carbon emissions. But it is also trying to address the basic question of the fact that you're living in a one planet world, and resources are limited, and ores like iron ore and everything else are non-renewable. So you have no choice but to do that, because otherwise you're going to run out of stuff. In fact, there's a very interesting picture of the periodic table that the American Chemical Society put out, where it shows that several of the elements that are important for life will not exist in another 100 years because we will have just used it up. So the idea of recycling, but recycling without losing the embedded energy and the embedded carbon, is a very important aspect of the circular economy, and that's what makes it important. But then there is another aspect and I will just stop there. Another aspect is what is very important for a company that is thinking in a circular way is that you need to design your product for a circular economy. You cannot just design it in any way that you want. So I'll give you again another example. A Jaguar car, and I'm talking about a Jaguar because that's part of the Tata Group and I'm familiar with what happens there. The way the Jaguar car is designed is that you can disassemble it in 2 hours after it is used, and then you can separate all its parts so that it can be recycled. Now, if you're not designing a product for disassembly and for recycling, then it's never going to be done. It's going to be too expensive to do that. So the circular economy in multiple ways has benefits, but it requires a lot of systems thinking and value chain thinking to make it absolutely happen. But once it happens, the benefits are huge. The benefits in terms of cost, the benefits in terms of saving of material, and the benefits in terms of utilizing the embedded GHG or carbon and not spilling out more in the idea of processing. So therefore, the answer is the barriers are a better understanding of it, making sure you design for it. Those are the barriers, and the opportunities, I think, are self-evident. So I'll stop there because we don't have enough time to get into a lot more detail. But thank you, Chair. I'll stop.
Thank you.
You're on mute.
Yeah, Shankar, that's very interesting and very informative. And even I'm learning what you're saying. I'm learning new things from what you're saying about the circular economy and how the Jaguar has been designed. That's a very interesting thing. And I hope that all the companies, all the corporates follow the principles which Tatas have followed in Jaguar designing. I think the time is not much. Mr. Desai has also come here on the frame. So I would like to thank, there were a few more questions, but there's not much of time. Time is out. So I would like to thank everyone, all the participants, all the panelists for providing a lot of information and a lot of guidelines for the future policy making, and especially to the financial sector and the chartered accountants on the reporting requirements and disclosures which companies need to do and how they can contribute towards sustainability by doing honest disclosures and how to check the disclosures on sustainability. So thank you everyone for participating in this panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator Sri Pravinji. You've done an excellent job. You have completed dot on time, and kudos to all of you. Mr. Praveen Garg, it's not just you who is learning. Everybody is learning. Everybody is learning. It's a big learning curve, and that's a great thing. I acknowledge once again Mr. Oliver, Mr. Shankar Venkatasaran, then Miss Barbara, my guru, Dr. Nandita Mishra, and Mr. Chaitanya Kalia for the great contribution and sharing your thoughts with us. And now it's time to move for me for the fourth and the last session. This session is of great importance, friends, and this will really tell us as to how the professional accounting organizations and the regional bodies are going to help chartered accountants or the accounting fraternity in shell. And friends, I must share you, there are 600 plus participants globally. And thank you all participants, and I welcome all of them once again. Now I will introduce Mr. Kevin Dempsey. He's the chief CFO of the International Federation of Accounts, IFAC. Mr. Kevin Dempsey, he's the chief executive of IFAC, has a long history of leadership in accountancy profession as well as in public service. As the Canadian Institute of Chartered Accountants President and CEO, Mr. Dempsey led Canadian accountancy professions unification, becoming the CPA Canada's first president and CEO after the merger. So we are very privileged to have with us Mr. Kevin. And now let's hear Mr. Kevin.
Good evening.
Yes.
Thank you for the invitation to address ICAI's Global Sustainability Summit. I trust it's been an informative and engaging use of your time, and I appreciate the focus that you and each of the other speakers is spending on this most important topic. As I said in my remarks recently to the IFAC Council, not only do I believe sustainability is an important issue for the profession, but the important issue for society over the long term. So we've got to get this right. I'd like to use my time with you to provide an update on some of the important work that IFAC is undertaking on behalf of the profession to influence the narrative around the sustainability agenda and to help ensure that we, as professional accountants, are positioned to meet both the responsibilities and opportunities involved in securing a sustainable future. Not surprisingly, IFAC's agenda for sustainability focuses on a global approach to sustainability standards, one that reduces the risk of regulatory fragmentation and builds on a standard-setting structure that already has legitimacy. I'm recording this message on November the 3rd, and earlier today, the IFRS Foundation made its official announcement about the establishment of the International Sustainability Standards Board, or as we call it, ISSB. It also published prototype climate and general disclosure requirements, which we hope will be finalized as soon as the middle of next year. IFAC enthusiastically welcomes this news. We have been working diligently for over a year to drive awareness and garner support for this initiative. In September last year, we issued our call for the formation of the ISSB. We call it the Roadmap. And that effort encouraged valuable dialogue among key stakeholders. In May of this year, we released our building block schematic. This is a very important document which sets out the way global standards in this space can coexist alongside local jurisdictional initiatives. Block 1 contains sustainability information relevant to an organization's short, medium, and long-term enterprise value. Block 2 has a multi-stakeholder focus on a company's positive and negative contributions to sustainable development, as well as its impact on economies, the environment, and people. Others, including IOSCO, have picked up the schematic in their reports. In June, we released our State of Play report on sustainability reporting and assurance. In this report, we surveyed the degree of sustainability reporting in the largest companies across the G20, plus Hong Kong and Singapore. The degree of reporting, standards used, and assurance thereon is not consistent across jurisdictions. We have held several regional roundtables and one with the forum of firms to better understand these results. And we've issued a document on using ISO 3000 as a guide to accompany the State of Play report. We'll continue to review these findings and plan to issue our policy recommendations very soon. And then this fall, we issued several new publications. First, an article focused on CEOs, setting out why the sustainability issue is different this time and CEOs must respond. Second, an addendum to our building block schematic, indicating how global standards can be adopted locally, which needs to be a key focus for PAOs now. And finally, a call to action focused on the reporting of climate-related matters during this 2021 reporting cycle. It's the here and now issue where there will be different views and expectations. I'd be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to spend a few minutes on this 2021 reporting cycle, because it's an issue that all of us need to be thinking about today. And I literally mean today. Let me hit a few highlights. There are very divergent views on how climate matters should be reported in the 2021 reporting cycle. On the one hand, investors, thinking longer term, would like to see more reporting, and indeed more in financial filings and the financial statements. Indeed, some have said rather bluntly that climate reporting is not good enough. On the other hand, while some jurisdictions are moving to mandate climate reporting on the basis of the Task Force on Climate Disclosures framework issued by the Financial Sustainability Board, financial reporting standards have not changed for 2021. Now, professional accountants in business, supporting both management and boards of directors, and as auditors, will be in the thick of these discussions this year. Getting this right is very important. Getting it wrong will damage our reputation. And make no mistake about it, many stakeholders are watching. So let's break down what's required this year versus the nice to haves that some investors want. As you all know, a company's management and those charged with governance have the primary responsibility for judgments, estimates, and disclosures in their annual reports, financial filings, and financial statements. While local jurisdictional requirements will vary, the key issue that the company must consider is, quote, will the effect of climate change present material risk to the company, close quote. Now, this can be a challenging task depending on the facts and circumstances facing any particular company and the way different climate-related scenarios may impact it, including the time horizon for the climate-related risks. Climate risk may exist, but the impact on current period financial statements may not be material. It may be, but it may not be. But if the risk is material, the company must consider what disclosures are required to explain those risks and their financial consequences, including any material impacts on financial filings and the financial statements taken as a whole. And the auditor's responsibility is then to assess the way the company has handled these disclosures, taking into account the financial reporting framework and assurance and regulatory requirements they must comply with in their jurisdiction. Now, things like, has the company a plan to align with the Paris Agreement or become carbon neutral? These are significant commitments that many investors and other stakeholders would like to see companies make. But there's no obligation under current reporting standards for companies to make these commitments or comment on them, and thus no obligation on auditors to opine on them. A company could decide to align with the Paris Agreement, but it's not required. I've spent a few minutes on this point because climate will be a very high-profile issue in this reporting season, and professional accountants will be at the center of it, as professional accountants in business and as auditors. And very importantly, it would not surprise me to see the positions taken by various companies in 2021 be subject to scrutiny and challenge, which inevitably will have a knock-on effect on our profession. So it's very important for professional accountants to be clear on what is required versus what's a nice to have, as they have robust and important climate-related discussions with senior management of companies and boards of directors this year. Companies and professional accountants cannot afford to ignore this issue. So what does all of this mean for us as individual accountants, as PIOs, and as a profession collectively? A few final thoughts. First, be a champion of integrated thinking. We need to double down on helping drive an integrated mindset in business, bringing financial and non-financial matters together. Today, this information often lives in different silos within a company. All of it needs to be brought under the control of the CFO or Chief Value Officer, as Mervyn King describes the role, to ensure there are the proper controls, data integrity, and integration of the information to best support internal decision-making and external reporting. I encourage all of you to be bold and brave in this regard, and to always seize the moments you can to drive such conversations forward. Second, trust your skills and competencies, even as you continually enhance them. Professional accountants not only have the skills and competencies needed to prepare, assure, and utilize this information, but also the expertise to build and evaluate necessary controls and processes related to sustainability. And identifying which existing foundational skills can be leveraged to meet new requirements and in creating access to obtain new subject matter expertise, IFAC strongly supports the position that professional accountants are best placed to meet the sustainability-related needs of organizations. But we need to demonstrate that every day. Finally, PAOs are key. As an organization, ICAI is heard by stakeholders in government, in business, and in society. No one else is better positioned to represent the profession in advocating for climate action. I urge you to use that collective voice in a way that will help shape the future, not just for the profession, but for society. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kevin. And this was really very eye-opening. And I must mention at this point in time that ICAI is relentlessly helping a lot to the accounting profession. It is making publications from time to time. In August 21 only, they have revised the background material on the business responsibility and sustainability reporting and deliberating exhaustively on the United Nations UN SDG of 2030. So Institute is doing its bit, and we are also happy to say that our professional brothers are also taking very important proactive role. And now is the fourth and the final session, but this is, as I mentioned to you, is a very important session. And we have this session moderator, Miss Alta Prinsloo. Ms. Alta Prinsloo is the Chief Executive Officer of the Pan-African Federation of Accountants, PAFA. Ms. Prinsloo joined the International Auditing and Assurance Standard Board back in 2002 and served as Deputy Director before transitioning to IFAC, where she served various executive roles, including leading IFAC's new approach to advancing education for the future-ready professional accountants. We'll be very privileged to have with us, ma'am. Then we have the panel speakers. Mr. John Devney, past President CPA Ireland. Mr. John, MBA and CPA, is the past President of the CPA Ireland. He has extensive experience of ranging from providing strategic and the financial advice to blue chip global companies to working with startups and SMEs. He is currently Associate Director at EFM, United Kingdom and Ireland. We have also with us Professor Terry, if I can call you as Mr. Terry, Deputy President, Asian Federation of Accountants, AFA. He currently serves as a Deputy President. At Asian Federation of Accountants. He has served as a Vice President of the Federation of Accountant Profession, Chairman of the Asian Chartered Accountants Professional Accounting Coordinating Committee, and Assistant Professor at Thammasat Business School. Then we have with us Mr. Manil Jaisinghe, Chairman Committee on Accounting Standard of SAFA. He is currently serving as a Chairman of the Accounting Standard Committee of the South Indian Asian Federation of Accountants SAFA and President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka. He is currently the Managing Partner of EY of Sri Lanka and Maldives, Head of Assurance in charge of Banking and Financial Services Practice, and counting over 38 years of extensive experience. And we have with us Mr. Richard Spencer, Director, Sustainability, ICAEW. Mr. Richard Spencer is a Director of the Sustainability at ICAEW. He has led the ICAEW's thought leadership and engagement program on sustainability. He sits on the Climate Disclosure Standards Board, Technical Working Group, and is a non-executive board member of the Social Values in UK. So we are all very excited to hear from you all dignitaries, the accountants leading sustainability agenda, the role of and the regional bodies. Now we'll first hear we'll now hand it over to our session moderator, Alta Pinslu. Miss Alta, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, CA Desai. And what an amazing time to be part of this accountancy profession. I listened partly to the previous panel, and I was thinking, this is the time for us, for the profession, and it's a time for us to make a difference. And listening to Kevin, something he didn't say today that I have heard him say in the past is, this is an opportunity for the profession. It's one that we can win, or it's one that we can lose. And so hopefully with my very, very competent and expert panelists today, we're going to talk to our audience and let them know how is it that we're going to win it? How is it that we're going to harness this opportunity and make a better world? So I'm going to start off with Richard. And Richard, developments in sustainability reporting are accelerating, and we heard about that in the earlier panel and also with Kevin. What is your view on the recent steps taken by the IFRS Foundation, and what might be the critical success factors? How are we going to move from commitment to action?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's to be welcomed because, frankly, in the world of sustainable disclosure, it was something of an acronym soup of different frameworks and standards, and served really only to confuse the market and didn't bring rigor or consistency. So the pursuit of a single global standard set within a credible and authoritative framework or context of the IFRS Foundation is just a signal of a huge step forward, massive step forward, and to be welcomed. And so I think that piece of consolidation is number one critical factor, and we're already seeing that happen. We're already seeing that happen, and that's good news. I think another one is assuring that the ISSB establishes a clear and robust due process, including sufficient time for stakeholders to consider the draft standards, and that's going to be important to make sure we get the quality. So yes, there is a need for speed. We don't have a lot of time, but we've got to make sure that we get it right. And there's quite a punishing schedule. I think the first draft is expected out next spring, or Northern Hemisphere next spring, Southern Hemisphere next autumn. And the good thing is that by consolidating with the 4 or 5 existing standard setters, they can get off to they have got expertise and knowledge they can already start with. So it's important that they're starting with that they're not starting from ground zero again. I think being independent from the IASB is important, but nevertheless we must see them working closely in areas of shared interest. Perhaps even establishing a framework for interconnectivity between financial reporting and sustainability reporting. I noticed Carbon Tracker were on earlier, and they produced a rather excellent report called Flying Blind, which doesn't exactly cover us in glory. But I think the challenge there is about the consistency of the front and the back of the report, and making sure that the information in there is high quality. And I think that and again that's one of the success factors for this. Then I think there's an important piece which is around gaining support and buy-in from jurisdictions around the world and getting the balance between what's common and what's additional in each jurisdiction. Right, so you've got to allow for that flexibility that reflects a different cultural or economic context. So I would say also that the European process that's going through for the corporate reporting sustainability reporting directive, that those two endeavours are pulling in the same direction and don't end up pulling us apart. I think that's important. But I'd say the start of those for me are the critical success factors.
Thank you so much, Richard. So I'm hearing consolidation, which of course we already saw the first steps, which I think is very positive, but also consistency across the globe. So let me turn to Prof. Terry. Prof, what sustainability reporting trends and developments are you seeing in the Asian region?
Yes, thank you for the questions. I'm very proud from here to hear on behalf of ASEAN's Federation of Accountants. This question is very good, and I think the sustainability report is important parts of sustainability discussion that starting to pick up some pace in the last couple of the years in ASEAN. The global discussions on sustainability standards given extra push to jurisdictions in our region to introduce initiatives to facilitate sustainability reporting. We have seen some trends and developments of governments, particularly in larger jurisdictions in our regions, to introduce policies and initiatives on sustainability, such as I have a lot of the information. For the first is from the Singapore Stock Exchange has issued a sustainability reporting guide that mandates annual sustainability reporting by all listed companies on a comply or explain basis. This is for one example. And the Bursa Malaysia, and this is a Malaysian Stock Exchange, issue a similar guide to aid listed issuers in reporting and embedding sustainability in their organizations. And in Indonesia, the Financial Services Authority issues a mandate for admissions of a sustainable finance actions plan, and the annual sustainability report by financial services providers, issuers, and public companies. The authority is also working on issuing regulations to align sustainability reporting standard for publicly listed companies with international standards. And Thailand, from Thailand, the Thailand Securities and Exchange Commissions, as well in the Corporate Governance Code 2017, requires company boards to ensure sustainability reporting using the framework that is appropriate and proportionate to the company size and complexity. The Stock Exchange of Thailand recommends the Global Reporting Initiative, or GRI reporting, in addition to sustainability reporting manual for listed companies. And the last one, the Philippines Securities and Exchange Commissions issues a sustainability report guidelines for publicly listed companies to disclose information on non-financial performance across economics, environmental, and social aspects. So for Alpha, together with our member organization, partners, and stakeholders, we have conducted more discussions, events, and activities on sustainability reporting issues. We look forward to continue these matters next year. Thank you. So I think it's very it's a trend.
Thank you so much, Prof. Terry. Your comments made me think about how it is important that we are thinking about the complete sustainability reporting and assurance ecosystem, where we start, with preparers, assurers, and regulators, as you have referenced. And later on, we'll talk more about the role of regional organizations and professional accountancy organizations. But just listening to the steps already taken in your region and the wealth of knowledge and experience being built, I can see the important role for regional organizations to actually gather this knowledge and become a gateway to the knowledge, and not only within the region, but actually globally. So thank you so much for your contribution. John, let's think a little bit about small and medium enterprises and their S&P advisors. Of course, I'm from Africa. We're here with our Asian colleagues, where we have many SMEs, often the engine of our economies. So what can SMEs and their SMP advisors do to support sustainability?
Thank you, Alda. I think it's important to start by saying that the one thing that SMEs and SMPs cannot do, and that's wait. We don't have any time. We're in a crisis, and we must all do whatever we can now to address that crisis. So typically, businesses and professions, they wait for legislation, standards, guidance prior to reporting or act into such manner. So we're all aware that global sustainability standards are on the way, and that different jurisdictions are at different stages in their sustainability reporting journey. However, things that we're doing at CPA Ireland is advising SMEs and their SMP advisors. We're advising them things to do immediately right now. So in many instances, SMP accountants are guiding SMEs on their sustainability journey in areas such as supply chain mapping, assessing sustainability impacts and risks, improving opportunities and efficiencies that various social, environmental and economic measures might be present, looking and presenting advice on access to funding, particularly on tax breaks, grants, loans, public sector funding in support of sustainability initiatives, developing sustainability reporting communication through establishing and reporting on metrics, and providing assurance on what is being reported as required by banks, government, large companies, where independent assurance is required. Now, that's a quite shift for SMPs, but as accountants, and I think Kevin related to this in talking about being a champion of innovative thinking and being bold and brave, as accountants, we have to be problem solvers and we have to look for solutions. We're trained and we're educated to guide businesses through strategic change. And this is one of the biggest strategic challenges that we now face. So I've just kind of given you a flavor of the SMP side. SMEs as well have got to look at their business models and they have to look at their competitive advantage. Obviously, I know we're restricted on time and we could talk about this for a long time, but that kind of gives you hopefully a flavor of what we're expecting and encouraging our SMPs in CPA Ireland to do.
Thank you so much, John. And of course, a strategic challenge, but also an amazing opportunity. I want to go back to assurance. You spoke about assurance. Why is assurance on sustainability reporting important? And do you believe the costs outweigh the benefits?
Costs outweigh the benefits. I think we have to. If I can say, the first thing is obviously all SMEs are cost sensitive, and a new cost coming into a business can have a significant impact. And there's no doubt that we are looking at significant challenges and, as you say, opportunities in this area. So I think obviously we have short-term costs, but I would champion that this will bring long-term benefits and maybe immediate costs. But I think in general, if we look overall, the benefits will outweigh the costs, and we have to embrace that. If we look at, say, some of the early movers in Europe, such as France, we're already seeing integrated reports connected to environmental, social, and governance performance. With financial performance. The mandatory ESG reporting framework in Europe is limited to large companies, but already we're seeing that smaller SMEs want to embrace this reporting as well. Again, Kevin related to stakeholders are watching businesses, and SMEs. As you said, SMEs are making up a huge percentage of the of business entities. So if we take in the UK and Ireland, I would register at least 80% of businesses are SMEs. So if SMEs do not embrace these challenges and these opportunities, large companies on their own are not going to achieve what's required, because those SMEs are feeding into the large companies. So SMEs, to remain profitable, for their businesses to be relevant, they must embrace the standards. They need a level playing field, and they need to be able to produce non-financial information which is consistent with their company, with their financial information, but is also consistent with all of their competitors and all of the businesses in the industry. So I think that really comes down to one global standard, because we're global companies. We're all interconnected. We all need to work together for our objectives in the for climate, reducing carbon emissions, and as such, a level playing field and an opportunity for businesses to compare and consolidate their information. It brings a cost, but I think if we are to really make progress, those costs will ultimately bring benefits, not just for individual businesses, but actually for our global objectives of reducing carbon emissions.
Thank you so much, John. I want to turn to you, Manil. And the other day I participated in a panel, total different topic, but what it made me realize is the role that we as professional accountants find ourselves in, and how we have an opportunity to influence in the organizations where we find ourselves, and how we can be change champions and change culture. So my question to you, Manil, is what is the role of top management in obtaining assurance on their organization's sustainability reports? And what is the significance of materiality in these engagements? And we heard Kevin touch a little bit on materiality. Over to you, Manil. Manil, are you on mute?
Hi, sorry, Asha. Thank you. And it's a very interesting question. A couple of things that comes into mind. First of all, when you come to the top management, they had to realize that the importance of reporting sustainability to its stakeholders, because stakeholders probably use this information to make economic decisions. So that's the first part. So if you acknowledge that it is an obligation by the management and the top management to tell that story, and report on sustainability, because sustainability in any business has to be the core. In the past, we were happy with economic part of organization, but today economic alone is not going to do. So you have to look at environment, you have to look at social, and obviously the governance that goes around this whole equation. So in reporting, you need to bring a level of credibility, and that's where the assurance part comes in. Because otherwise each person can report in different ways. How does the market out there take this information, make it comparable, make decisions based on this information? So that's where the importance of assurance comes when it comes to these kinds of reports. So for financial reporting, we have assurance, but all this additional information, now we are saying it is critical to evaluate the sustainability of an entity, given the importance of climate change, social aspects of society, even the pandemic, for example. So given that, it is critical that if these items are sought after or required, I think Kevin mentioned how people are now asking for this critical information, then automatically the assurance part needs to come in. Because that's the only way the markets, because since these are sort of done in two different platforms, that's the only way the markets can place reliance on what is being reported. So that's the importance of assurance. From your second point that you were asking about materiality, actually, I was listening to this same conversation yesterday, and there was a lot of debate about materiality being taken on. In that, there was also thoughts that was mentioning that should there be duality in materiality, one level of materiality for financial statements, one level of materiality for these other reports, environment, social, and various other reports. One of the things that I feel that is going to be an issue is that many things that we bring in through ESG and environment, social, and things like that, it's going to be qualitative as opposed to quantitative. A lot of reporting is going to be qualitative as opposed to quantitative. Quantitative means it has to be measurable, it has to be reported in some form of numbers or whatever it is. But a lot of things are going to be statement oriented, and the question there would be how we are going to evaluate this and how do you apply materiality to some of these statements. So there are some challenges ahead in applying materiality in assurance. As we know, historically we know how to apply materiality when it comes to historical financial statements because they are measurable amounts, and then you know how to evaluate. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how things will pan out. I think IFAC has put out guidance on ISA 3000. So I think this is a space that is going to evolve. But I think, as many speakers before me mentioned, this is an important time in the history where accounting profession is going to be, I think, leading the way to some extent. Because we are the custodians for measurement, we are the custodians for even strategy formulation. A lot of things, I think, the accountants have a lot of input that they give into an organization. Unfortunately, we are the unsung heroes. But anyway, we do a lot of things. So we, as a profession, I think, has a critical role to play in this. And then I think in the next year or so, things will start to move.
Thank you so much, Munil. So, Richard, who is responsible for determining the materiality thresholds? Management and/or the assurance provider?
I'm sure there are libraries full of books on this. I think, obviously in the statutory audit, the auditor is important because the beneficiary of this is the shareholders. In other sustainability reporting, I think it's right that we begin with management, but it seems there's a sort of big underlying question here, I think, which is really about the ability for greenwashing, and I think if management decide on the materiality, the assurer provider has got to be there to challenge that and draw on their experience to challenge that, and that's a really important part of what this profession does. Is bring that experience and making sure that you can provide that independent challenge, and it's incredibly difficult. Yeah, it's incredibly difficult because you have commercial relationships, you've got all sorts of pressures, but one of the things that makes you a professional is that you look through that and you're guided by all that experience and your community, your profession to do the right thing. But I think also it's very easy and to kind of blame the auditors in this, but we're seeing a kind of reporting revolution. And this is part of a huge transformation of our economies that we're trying to undertake in an incredibly short space of time. So whilst the auditors have this very important role to play, it's, we can't just put the burden of success purely on their shoulders. We've all got a part to play. We've all got a part to play here. So yeah, really important that the auditors challenge this. But I think for us as professional bodies, there's a piece around capacity and what I call, what you don't know, knowing what you don't know. We did a survey over the summer of our members as part of our business confidence monitors, so that we do that monthly with our members in business. And we did it in 2019 around climate change, but also strategy for climate change. So do you know the WEF governance principles? Do you know the TCFD? Do you have the information? Are you aligned? And this sort of thing. And in 2019, the kind of response wasn't great, frankly. But this year, when we ran it again, it looked like, you know, wow, we really got a great improvement here. And so we were a bit skeptical. This wonderful tidal wave of improvement. And so we went back, and what we did was, out of that sample of members in business, we took out the experts, and we defined the experts as those who were report preparers. And whereas in the survey as a whole, it was saying, we're more prepared, we've got the right information. When we took out those report preparers, it felt what we were getting was that they didn't feel they had sufficient information, and they weren't taking the underlying actions. And I don't think that's a sign of a conspiracy. I think it's a sign of people, a lot of our members don't know what they don't know. And once they get to a level of understanding, suddenly the enormity of what they don't know is there. And so I think for us as professional bodies, there is a huge burden on us to get our members what I'd call professionally ready. And you know, we're doing it, I'm sure, the Institute of Chartered Accountants in India and other our sister organisations across the globe are doing the same. But I think not to be underestimated, not just building it into our qualifications, but building it into our CPD.
Definitely, Richard. And what I like is how, you know, you spoke about the fact that what we have already equips us pretty well for the future. It is really overcoming that piece of what we don't know, right? And how do we then use what we know to address that? So really good
absolutely. Yeah, I think it's the I personally don't have concerns about the skill sets.
Yeah.
Yes. Where it's the knowledge and the experience.
Yes, very good.
That we have to build up.
Prof. Terry, we're going to talk a little bit more about skills, but I want to first just round out our conversation around assurance by asking you whether you are seeing an annual increase in the number of assurance reports published alongside sustainability reports in the Asian region. And what are you seeing? Are companies using the same independent accounting firms for their audit of financial statements and assurance on their sustainability reports, or are they using different service providers?
Thank you for your questions. And in terms of statistics, it's difficult to say. But in general, I think this is a common trend that is also relevant in ASEAN. For many of the jurisdictions in ASEAN, third-party assurance for sustainability reporting occurs on a voluntary basis. And however, external assurance is gaining momentum, reflecting a growing demand for companies to attain external validations. And a shift in views about how much it affects the credibility of the report. I think IFAC's report publications, the state of pay in sustainability assurance, provides a good indications of the current state. In issuance of assurance for sustainability reports in select ASEAN jurisdictions, especially Indonesia and Singapore, based on this publication, you can see that. I can share you something. Majorities of the companies in Indonesia and Singapore that is included in the study prepare sustainability report. Large percentage using the Global Reporting Initiative or GRI standards. This is one thing for the study. And however, when it comes to assurance, majorities of these companies are yet to obtain third-party assurance. For those who have, in average, only around 50% of the assurance are provided by audit firms, the rest being other service providers. Unfortunately, I do not have any information on whether companies are using the same independent accounting firms for the audit of their financial statements and the assurance on their sustainability reports. I am certain that with the growing importance of sustainability and demand for companies to disclose and report sustainability information, we will have more information on this in the next futures, I think. So this is the trend, and I'm not sure about what is the accurate the statistic figure. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. It does bring me back to what I said earlier. One of the things Kevin always talks about when he says it's the accountancy professions to lose, right? And we should make sure that we're not losing out on this opportunity. And listening to the 50% statistic that you provided, I think there is work to be done on our part to harness this opportunity. So let's spend a moment on the role of the professional accountant, but also the implications for learning and development. And we touch a little bit on that, Richard, but let me ask Manil, professional accountants in leadership positions have a unique opportunity to progress the sustainability agenda in their organizations. And I've spoken about that earlier. In what various and evolving ways will they engage to deliver the sustainability agenda? Manil?
Yes, I think professional accountants, I think I mentioned to you even earlier, they are in that unique position within organizations where they have interactions in all parts of the organization, right? And especially with the higher end top management. So, because they are in that leadership position, they have the ability to influence a lot of things. So that's the key factor that we need to look at. So, professional accountants, if you look at it, we can start by leading by example. Basically infiltrating or getting into or aligning strategy and plans in order to meet with sustainability goals and targets and things like that. We have the ability, as I mentioned earlier also, most of these things, the measurement part comes from the accounting. So we are the, I would say, custodians of that value chain, right? So we have to probably develop what are those measurement criteria, how it's going to be measured, how it's going to be tracked, because otherwise it becomes a bunch of words, right? I can say a thing like we want to reduce maybe the carbon footprint by reducing consumption of electricity. That's a statement, right? But then the question is, how do I know I'm getting there? So that's the part of tracking, measuring, and moving forward. So once again, we have that unique position where we can influence that. So we have, how can we incorporate, we can help companies to incorporate SDG strategies into their businesses. Then we also have, I think IFAC put out a document long years ago where it says that profession can at least influence at least 9 out of the 17 SDGs. So things like, quality in education, reducing inequality, climate action, a lot of those things. So what we need to make sure that is that those then get embodied into strategy. Then we find a mechanism how to report them to management, because top management will also want to know, are we going in the right direction? Are we achieving whatever it is? So that's where the accountants play a key part. Then comes the final part where the accountants also help in the final reporting to stakeholders. So that part also comes in place. In addition to that, you have the assurance bit which we talked about in order to give credibility to that information. But one of the things I foresee in this whole equation is that I think one of the speakers beforehand mentioned, we have several frameworks floating around. Now, unless we get into some uniformity in this, the question is the value of this information that's coming out. I don't know, I think there will be some questionability because one company might report on a GRI framework, another company might report on using ISSB or FASB, FSSB, or whatever it is. So are these comparable or whatever it is? So I think that needs to sort out. And one of the things that we have started from a institute from Sri Lanka point of view, we have looked at all these things and tried to come up with a commonality in this whole equation. Otherwise, we are going to go all over the place. And that will also propel the importance of the accountants in business as well as in organizations. So I hope we will go down that road, because I think it has to happen. If we don't have a common framework to some extent, if the world doesn't come to some agreement or some commonality, I think everything else follows. We'll have some difficulty in catching that traction to move forward.
Thank you, Manil. Yes, I think that we need to finish that alphabet soup, right? We will really need to get a recipe for a new soup, but it's not going to be an alphabet soup. And also, when you were talking, I was thinking about what Mervyn King always says, that accountants can save the world, right? So that is our mission. So, Richard, what competencies will we have to obtain, or what competencies that we already have will we have to hone to engage in the sustainability agenda of our organizations?
Okay. Well, I think, why don't we, I think to start with that remark, accountants save the world. I'm very sad to tell you that actually probably accountants aren't going to save the world, at least not by themselves. But almost certainly we have the profession has a massive role to play. Because without the information and the systems and the analysis and so on that all our profession provides, how could anyone make an informed decision? So we have a huge role, but that brings us to the first kind of competency, I think, is the ability to collaborate. Now, and collaborate just isn't doing something with someone. It's a process of what I'd almost call the most productive part of it is constructive disagreement. If you're both just agreeing, well, you have no check. And if you're both in violent disagreement, you probably just don't reach any kind of point of view. But there's got to be some grits there and collaboration. So real willingness to engage with other points of view and to be prepared to listen to other points of view, to understand them. Rather than to reply to them, and to be prepared to give up your kind of assumptions. So that sort of collaborative process. But I think the other thing is that the profession have to be system thinkers. You know, one of the we often hear this word bandied around that we now live in the Anthropocene, which means that we're in an age where humans have a determining factor on the environment. But the great thing about it is that we have consciousness, so we know what we're doing, and that's an opportunity for hope, because if we know what we're doing, there's a chance we can get it right. But that involves us understanding our interconnectivity with everything, and so I think one of the big things that I'd say the two big things that need to come to the fore in the profession is the ability to collaborate meaningfully and to think in systems, dynamic, complex, adaptive systems.
That's great, Richard. So I'm immediately going to turn to Prof. Terry, because I'm going to ask him as an academic, and based on what we have just heard from Manil and particularly now Richard, are we preparing our students for a role in sustainability reporting and assurance as we've just envisaged? Are we teaching them the right things?
Thank you for your question. It's really directly to my duty as well. So as an academic, okay. So this is indeed a challenge for the professions, not only at the level of professionals, accountants, where we need to assess if our professional qualifications are equipping our accountants with the necessary skill set and the competence for sustainability reporting and assurance. But also at the basic levels of our accounting education. In my opinion, our qualifications as accounting will prepare us for any challenges, including for a role in sustainability reporting and assurance. Our younger generations is probably more connected and aware of the different sustainability issues. I think this is an important quality of our students. our task as academic is to make sure that we are introducing these new developments into our learning outcomes. I certainly hope there will be more supporting materials that the academics can use to facilitate this learning to our students. For my experience, so I think that it's not just only for the accounting educations. I think it's all of other business and other areas of educations discuss a lot in the sustainability. So and another one is that the education system nowadays is not just within the classroom. So the educations will include the real business sector. So the students will be encompassed with the real situation, especially for the sustainability and the global warming something. So I think not just the economic, and I think the in the corporate side and the business have to collaboration together in order to equip the next generations. And I'm not too sure that for nowadays, and for my experience, I face a lot of my students and the academic system environments to groom them to having the good concerns and standpoints of sustainability. This is my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Terry. Earlier on, when I asked my first question, I spoke about the kind of ecosystem around sustainability reporting, but I also believe that there is an ecosystem around learning and development, and I'm talking about initial professional development and continuing professional development, and that it is really important that this wide variety of stakeholders come together in making sure that we are preparing our talent for the future. And at PAFA, we are actually planning to develop a accountancy competency framework, a core competency framework for Africa with a focus on future fit accountants. So really saying, sometimes when regionally or globally we work on a competency framework, it tends to be kind of the race to the bottom or lowest common denominator, right? But really, how can we come up with something that's truly aspirational and really will move accountants from, as I always say, doing the same things to doing the same things differently to doing different things, which really requires a revolution, the speed at which we have to move. So very good points there. Thank you so much. And coming to this ecosystem and the importance of making sure that professional accountants are prepared for this role, let me turn to you, John, and ask you more about the role of professional accountancy organizations in preparing their members and their students for a role in sustainability reporting and assurance.
Thank you, Alta. I think the key role is one of leadership, and IFAC, regional organizations and professional accountancy organizations are already providing that leadership. Many professional bodies have already led the way in identifying the SDG goals that are relevant to them as an organization and have incorporated sustainability as a strategic priority in their strategic planning. Many have already gone further, and I can take my own professional body, CPA Ireland, as an example where we have embedded sustainability and non-financial reporting in our curriculum so that CPAs of the future will be positioned to lead in sustainability reporting. Professional bodies are also providing thought leadership to their members and are assisting professional accountants who are challenged by business to help report on their commitment to sustainability. As I mentioned earlier, SMEs and SMBs are already doing a lot in this space, and with the development of standards which are expected, that will provide empowerment and will be able to do more. I think as well, Richard raised a point on collaboration, and I think it's important that professional accountancy organizations collaborate and share information, and that we are all, as we're all on different stages of our journey. For example, if we look at France, we can learn from our colleagues in the French professional bodies because they had mandatory reporting in place for a number of years. So, nobody has all of the answers. And I think, these are all areas that we must strive to. And as you said all the way through, this is a case of opportunities for us as a professional, as professionals and professional bodies to expand and to grow and develop in this crucial area of carbon neutrality and climate change.
Thank you, John. Richard, can you share a few of the ICAEW's initiatives in this area?
Yeah, sure. So I think I break them down into three areas of informing, convening, and inspiring. And in terms of informing, we're signatories to the Green Finance Education Charter, and we've built sustainability into the qualification. It should be bled through it at all points. We're developing to launch next year a sustainability certificate. We obviously do the usual range of webinars, conferences, seminars, and so on. So that's the sort of informing side. Convening, we've established a sustainability and climate change community. We established that in January, and I think it's now at about 10,000 members. And then I think it's important to inspire members. And we have a campaign called 1,000 Chartered Accountants that we're doing with the Institute of Chartered Accountants in Scotland and Chartered Accountants Ireland, which is celebrating our members who are already doing good work in the area of climate action. And we have various campaigns like the one which we call When Chartered Accountants Save the World, which is highlighting areas where our members are doing great things or areas where our members could be active. So I think it's important to do all those, to inspire them, to inform them, and to bring them together.
Thank you, Richard. And I have to say that ICAI is now an affiliate of PAFA, and we have been engaging with the leadership on the amazing work that the Institute is doing in the area of sustainability reporting. And I think it's a really great example for professional accountancy organizations across the world, and something that us as a regional organization can draw on. So I think therefore it is just appropriate that I end with Manil. The last question goes to you. And it is about SAFA and its members, where we are always committed to the development of the profession, industry, society, and the economy in the SAARC region. So what role can SAFA play in promoting sustainability reporting and assurance in the SAARC role, or maybe in the SAARC region, or maybe I should say, what role do you already play? So over to you.
Thank you. Yes, actually, SAFA itself is it has a huge role to play in the SAFA region. Now, what we have done is we've started already in the accounting standards committee to start identifying a common framework for sustainable reporting, which I think is fundamental and foundational, so that it can be then used across the other countries. In this part of the world, sometimes many of these good practices also take place through competitions. So we have like the best corporate report competition and things like that, and SAFA has such a competition. So the next question is incorporating some of these elements or targets or initiatives into that competition, which will change the behavior of the corporates as well as business entities in the individual countries. So that is one area that has to take place. Then also we also look at each country and the level at which they have incorporated or developed the sustainable reporting, so that it is collated and the best practices are then shared among each other, so that each country then leverages out on those to go forward. I think as like what Terry mentioned in the ASEAN region, in the SAFA region also, that continues to happen. And I think another important feature that SAFA would do is to support its POAs in their journey so that they can help in each country. They can push forward this sustainability agendas. because sometimes some countries may have gone certain amount in the on that road. Some may be still in the infancy. So it's a question of getting all of them into a same page, as it were, or same because all of us have the same destination, but where we are in that destination may vary from country to country. So SAFA will be the body which basically try to make sure that we all are in the same place in that journey. So these are some of the things that we will have to ensure. But as I said, the key thing is to try and develop a common framework, because I think that's important if you're going to get some consistency in this whole thing. And one of the issues with sustainability is this comparability of information, which is coming out there. And I think it's a huge problem, because if you have too much of confusion out there, the value of the information will become to some extent diluted. So that is one.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Manil, and panelists. Thank you so much. Thank you, John, Richard, Prof. Terry, and Manil. I really appreciate your very valuable input. Back to you, CA Desai.
Thanks to you also, Alta. Thanks to you also, and all the panelists for detailed discussion about the all the various aspects. Alta, one thing I would like about you, especially raising a question about how are we going to educate our students. And that's the best part. It has never been touched upon. And there's a very unique approach that we must, we are elderly, all grown up members. Of course, they are conveying the message, but important is to educate the next generation, the children. And that's really a best point. So it was a great learning curve from all of you friends. And I thank you, everybody. I thank you, in fact, Mr. Kevin Dempsey, Alta, John, and Professor Terry and Manil and Richard Spencer. Thanks a lot to all of you for sparing your time and sharing your wisdom and good words with us. And now I think someone want to say something? Then. And now it's my concluding remarks that we are very happy as an accountant. We are the privileged part of the society that being an accountant, we are proud to be a conduit for spreading the awareness about the global awareness. So we are very happy and proud to be there. And I appreciate that what Mr. Manil has said, there has to be need of the single framework. And you never know, like IFRS, there may be one single framework in future. So friends, it's not just the opportunities, but the responsibilities on all of us. And reporting is just not an aim, but it is a means to an end. And we have to all act together. It's now or never. We should all come together and act collectively. Friends, these 2 days have been a great learning curve, a great learning session for all of us, for all our viewers, listeners, and including the panelists and everybody who has participated in Great Summit. I thank you so much, ICI, for doing that. And on behalf of ICI, I take this opportunity to say thanks to all of you and to say namaste to all the panelists and the moderators and the participants, and more importantly, those who are participating in this summit webinar. To all of you, thank you so much for being participating. And as per the last number which I got, the participants were 648. Thanks to the Sustainability Reporting Standard Board and International Affairs Committee of ICI and all the staff members of ICI and that committee. Thank you so much once again. And I take this opportunity to conclude this and say thank you, everybody. We are all indebted to you for your great contribution and help. The best part about this is that the fact that we are conducting this webinar in a virtual mode itself is a message that yes, we are all aware of the fact that how much energy and how much travel cost and how much fuel and everything has been saved by conducting this kind of webinars. So that itself is also a message that we are aware of it, and we accountants are feeling proud to be part of this global summit and global endeavor for the climate change and carbon control. Thank you, everybody.